Hi, my name is Emily Hanson, and I'm going to present my study that I did for Morningside College. This study was done in the spring of 2019 in a preschool classroom. I got my undergraduate degree at the University of Northern Iowa in early childhood and elementary education, and this is my last semester at Morningside College. My study was on the effects of large motor movement on preschool number identification skills. The problem that I see, especially in my classroom, is that preschool students are lacking adequate skills of number identification into kindergarten. If I ask any kindergarten teacher in my building, numbers 0 to 10 and even 0 to 30 are not easily identified by children. The reason is there's not a lot of time to teach things, and we push and push literacy, so teachers have less time. There was a study later done in my presentation that I might talk about that said, on average, math gets 1 minute a day in a 3-hour preschool day. So just a lack of time. And also, movement is so important to these preschool students. They need to move to learn. My why is that preschoolers really need this skill in order to start addition, subtraction, algebraic formulas, all those basic things they learn in elementary school. Also, my why is I hate seeing kids in desk learning. So I really wanted a way in my classroom to have a good intervention that kids could learn through movement. Some of the literature that I looked at, first I looked at the impact of preschool mathematics. Preschool number recognition is a vital skill. They need to learn this before learning other math fluency and proficiency throughout their lives. Skills developed during preschool can lead to deeper understanding of all mathematic concepts. Preschoolers really need core instruction. I know there's some debates out there about whether 3-year-old or 4-year-old preschool is necessary, but it is the best time to learn some skills so that they don't start their academic career behind. The chances of elementary school students having mathematic difficulties in preschool were so much higher. That difficulty will continue with them through high school, middle school, elementary school. So having students proficient in mathematics and reading in preschool is so predictive of the rest of their lives. And by the end of high school, if they're not proficient, they're less likely to do postgraduate schooling or find employment after high school. The impact of physical movement interventions just in any grade, any content areas that students can improve literacy skills when a physical activity was presented into preschool literacy lessons. There's also proof that in middle school that there was improvement into literacy sessions as well. Literacy and movement groups showed more progress and than a control group. So the 3 fundamentals when we think about physical movement are stability, manipulation, and locomotive skills. These 3 things can easily be embedded into any type of instruction. There's many studies about just physical movement in general benefiting academics. Another thing about physical movement interventions is that play levels were measured in a study and by accelerometers. So these are things that were on students during active play. And students who moved more had stronger self-regulation. Stronger self-regulation is directly correlated to higher literacy and mathematics scores. So even just throughout our day, if kids are moving more, they get more self-regulation and better academic skills. Physical movements and mathematics, specifically in preschool. Snyder and his colleagues believe that students' success could significantly increase physical, cognitive, and academic involvement when physical activity was included in research. This would indicate that moving in preschool was strongly encouraged, and stronger student engagement was a result of more physical movement. Melanie Farney, Bertucci, and Baretti studied 43 preschool students in Italy in early numeracy skills. They concluded that students had a 66% higher IQ score at the end of the study, more than the control group, because they embedded that physical movement. So all in all, embedding physical activity into different grade levels and multiple subject areas has been successful. So this research would express that it can be successful in my preschool mathematics level. I also tied my research to Howard Gardner's multiple intelligences. When we're moving and we're learning math, we're using so many of those intelligences. We can use it linguistically by talking about numbers. Logical and mathematical is the bulk of the study because we're studying math. Visual spatial, some of the activities were visually presented, like the rolling of the dice. So we didn't have to use any words. I could have just rolled the dice and we could have done it. Bodily kinesthetic is that large motor movement. Interpersonal, some studies were done alone, and interpersonal, some of the activities were done in groups of people. Musical, some of our activities were done with music. And naturalistic, we did some activities outside. Hopscotch was a fun thing to do outside. Rolling dice we could do outside. Sometimes that fresh air, just being out in nature, helps kids learn more. Howard Gardner's multiple intelligence also recognizes that kids learn in a variety of ways, and some kids learn better in different ways. So I was able to utilize that in my intervention. Also, when they're combined, students can achieve at a higher level. So in all the studies, we're combining logical, mathematical, and bodily kinesthetic. So we're following some of Howard Gardner's key focuses. The purpose statement of my study was to collect research on physical activity interventions that were embedded into number identification instruction with preschool students. This was a single subject to AB design study to compare the intervention and baseline phases. So there was 6 weeks of a baseline where my instruction remained the same in my classroom, and then there were 6 weeks where I added in 5 minutes a day a large motor movement into number identification for each child in the classroom. Data was taken using the FastBridge Early Math Number Identification Progress Monitoring Level K, and there were 3 different forms used instead of using the same one 3 times. Data was taken at weeks 1, 6, and 12, so I compare 1 to 6, that progress was considered the baseline, and week 6 to 12 was considered the intervention. The hypothesis of the study is when preschool students are exposed to embedded large motor movement during mathematics instruction, they will be able to recall more numerals in 1 minute on the FastBridge learning progress monitoring. The independent variable was embedded large motor movement activities, and the dependent variable was preschool students' number recognition. The possible impact is that preschool students have more knowledge of number identification, are prepared for number operations throughout elementary school, middle school, high school, just a better foundation of mathematics. Methods. I had 30 preschool students, 15 males and 15 females, all average age 4. 9 low socioeconomic students, 28 Caucasian and 2 Albanian. That's mainly just where my school is, not a lot of diversity there. They attend 12 hours of preschool a week, so 3 hours a day, 4 days a week. There's a morning group and an afternoon group. That was not a random determination. It was kind of the principal, my choice, and parent choice of what group they were in. So they were not random selected for my classroom, and therefore they were not randomly selected for this study. The materials that you needed were numbers printed in 100 Arial font on cardstock and laminated for the slat mat. A slat mat is a clear mat on the ground for the numbers to slip into so that they could crawl and hit the numbers. Hopscotch was also a clear mat on the ground for the numbers to slip into so they could hop on them and say what they were. Number songs, I used Jack Hartman counting to 20, and another one counting to 100. Dice rolling, you needed dice with visual board maker cues on them for clap, snap, stomp, a few other ones that we did. And then also numbers were written on them, which could be done with a dry erase marker. And the last thing was a 12-inch trampoline, and then numbers were taped to the wall that could be changed easily, and slapping those numbers that were printed. Also, you needed a paper and pencil for the FastBridge testing and an iPhone X timer application. The procedure, like I said before, weeks 1 to 6 were baseline, so I taught the regular Gold creative curriculum for this preschool classroom. And the 12-week intervention was I did 5 minutes of those activities. Data analysis, dependent sample t-test scores were compared at from weeks 1, 6, and 12, and that reflects on my data. To determine if more success was made when intervention was in place versus the baseline. So did the baseline might have showed progress, but did the intervention show more progress? Our results showed that when you compared weeks 1 to 6, there was progress, but there was more progress made from weeks 6 to 12. The results from the dependent t-test indicate that students made more progress when the intervention was in place than the baseline. This would confirm that the hypothesis is true, that when large motor movement activities are embedded, number recognition skills will increase. Some may argue that this hypothesis may not be true because also progress was made in the baseline phase. But for me as a teacher, it's really nice to know that progress was made during my regular intervention and my regular instruction, and then that additional progress could be made if an intervention was in place. The implications, I have implications for students, teachers, curriculum, and administrators. So the big thing for students is participation. Some students just really didn't want to participate. So if they don't participate, they really can't make progress. For teachers and students, the size of groups. Sometimes we had to work in groups of 10 kids. Lowering that size of groups would obviously mean that students got more valued instruction. Engagement for teachers and students is also important. If they're not engaged, they're not learning. Like I said, with the size of groups, more focused intervention would happen with smaller groups. My groups were also not completely random, so that can be an implication in this study. The curriculum is the Gold Creative Curriculum, which wants open play-based opportunities. This was a structured activity, so it did not align with the curriculum that we follow in preschool. And for teachers and administrators, we need to encourage all members to be active participants. So that's a big implication of this study. The limitations was that there were so many activities. I was doing 5 different activities, no real set schedule, just making sure I got the 5 minutes a day. So it's hard to determine, was trampoline effective or was it those number songs? Another limitation is the time. 5 minutes a day is a short amount of intervention. If we would have taken away, would they still have made more progress? And also 6 weeks of intervention is a short duration of study. So a longer study would prove maybe if it was more effective. The sample size is that there was only 30 students and 1 teacher. So getting more school districts involved and multiple classrooms would be more effective to determine if it wasn't just my situation and other classes also benefited. And I got to use my own class for convenience, and that's a limitation. Recommendations would be to implement one activity for the intervention phase 5 minutes daily to see which one was beneficial, and increase the amount of weeks for the intervention. Also to increase the sample size and amount of teachers. And there are my references.